I know that a few more will be joining in, sir,
Okay.
particularly from your from the services background. We already have a number of officers who are here as part of their pursuit of degrees and diplomas. But we'll also be having a number of other officers joining in, sir. So,
Okay.
with your permission, I think we'd like to begin, sir.
Yeah, should we start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I
Sure.
will. I will briefly sort of take this opportunity to, welcome everyone who's joined us, both from within the university and outside the university. A very good afternoon to all of you, and a very warm welcome to the School of International Cooperation, Security, and Strategic Languages. We run this flagship lecture series called the Lavard Confab on National Security. We began this in October 2021, so it's been about 18 months since we began. And this is the 27th talk in that series. And for those of you who've joined us for the first time, I'm Dr. Venkateshwaran, the director of the school. The conversations in this lecture series, was envisioned or revolves around issues that are very pertinent to the major focus areas of the school. That is on international relations and national security, political economy, and strategic languages. This lecture series endeavors to bring eminent personalities like General Joshi and including policymakers in serving in government and opinion influencers from the wider strategic community to provide varied perspectives, thereby adding to the existing discourse on the subject. It will also act as a platform for students from different areas of specializations. We have about 10 schools, all focused on various issues of national security at the Rashtriya Raksha University. And we have students who've joined us from across domains. We'd like them to use this platform also to interact with one another, thereby enabling a transdisciplinary inquiry into research at the university. We've had many prominent speakers, distinguished practitioners who've served in the highest or who are serving in the highest levels of government, including our current Finance Secretary, Dr. Somnathan, the current Sri Lankan Ambassador to India, Ambassador Milinda Borogoda, the former Additional Secretary of the Ministry of Commerce, Sri Sanjay Chadda. We have the NSAB member and the just recently retired DG of the China Center for Contemporary Studies, General Narsiman, who we are expecting will be also joining us. General Khandare, who is current defense advisor as well as former military advisor at the National Security Council Secretariat. We've had Ambassador Pankaj Saran, who was the former Deputy National Security Advisor and served at the National Security Council Secretariat. So I've just named a few of the speakers who have joined us, and General Joshi just adds to that list. Without taking much time, I'd like to briefly talk about the topic that General Joshi has sort of decided to speak upon today, and largely I think to this very educated audience, it's not very difficult for me to uh, reiterate that threats to national security today are extremely dynamic and multidimensional from before. These threats have evolved from the traditional spheres primarily revolving around protecting our external borders from outside powers and securing our internal environment from domestic challenges to vulnerabilities in the non-traditional spheres, including rapid environmental changes, access to clean water and energy, quality food, health, and hygiene, as was evident during the recent COVID pandemic, and the rising use of asymmetric warfare, often supported by some states to try and pursue their narrow objectives, like Pakistan, for example. In this context, governments around the world are increasingly aligning their resources across domains in an attempt to evolve a comprehensive approach towards addressing national security challenges. Today, we will be deliberating on an extremely important issue having significant implications for our national security. With the advent of non-traditional security challenges and the more recent reiteration of how traditional security challenges have not withered away, as was probably assumed by many strategic thinkers. And this is evident from what's happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as the recent Ukraine conflict. The character of warfare appears to be evolving dynamically. And along with this, the role of the armed forces, including even in matters of diplomacy, has become critical. This is not a new phenomena, but I think because the environment and the situation is constantly evolving and throwing up interesting and complicated situations, the character of these roles that were being played is also being constantly questioned, and one has to adapt. Um, this has been very evident in the recent clashes, for example, along the LAC, followed by the prolonged standoff and the multiple round of negotiations that have been undertaken. To deliberate on finer details on this, we have today a decorated soldier and an expert practitioner to interact with us. General Yogesh Kumar Joshi was commissioned into the 13 Jammu and Kashmir Rifles in 1982, June 1982 to be precise, and served the country exceptionally for 40 years before retiring last year. Hence, in those 4 long decades, his achievements are many. But for the sake of brevity and because we are all here to listen to General Joshi, I'll highlight some of his more prominent roles. General Joshi last served as the GOC in C in Northern Command from February 2020 until January 2022. General Joshi has served multiple times in the Military Operations Directorate at Army Headquarters, including most prominently during the 2016 surgical strikes against Pakistan. He has also served multiple times in the Eastern Ladakh sector, including again most prominently as the Army Commander, spearheading the Indian response to PLA's attempt to alter the status quo on the LAC by use of force in 2020. He has also served as DG Infantry, spearheading the modernization drive and the procurement of a large number of weapon systems and equipment. General Joshi has served as the defense attaché in Beijing. One would say more prominently in his list of achievements, he's an expert on China affairs. He was the defense attaché in Beijing between 2005 and 2008, and he speaks the Chinese language fluently. During his distinguished career, General Joshi has been awarded multiple times with the Param Vishesh Seva Medal, the Uttam Youth Seva Medal for commanding the Fire and Fury Corps, the Ati Vishesh Seva Medal, the Veer Chakra for his part in the Operation Vijay during the Kargil War, and the Sena Medal. So with that very, brief introduction to his outstanding achievements, I would like to now invite, on behalf of the university as well as on behalf of the school, sir, and I hand over the mic over to you, sir, and we'll take it forward from there.
Roger.
Once again, I welcome you, General Joshi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Venkateshwaran, for the invite today to speak to such an enlightened audience. And a very good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure and honor for me to address all of you. And at the same time, it is also quite overwhelming for me to articulate my views on the evolving character of war and concomitant diplomacy. For 4 decades, I have been in the business of executing violence and diplomacy, but to talk about it is something totally different. Nevertheless, in the given time frame, I shall attempt to share my views on the same, which I would say by no means is the only view. Perspectives change with personalities and experiences. Looking back even the ancient times, Indian scriptures like Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita, war was means to an end and not an end in itself. Clausewitz defines war as organized violence to achieve political ends. And the German word used by him is Politik, which can be interpreted as either policy or politics. So, nature of war, therefore, is fundamentally political. And Clausewitz believed that its nature will never change, and its fundamental components, that is, the use of violence or the threat of violence as an extension of politics to compel the enemy to a will, is immutable and must always be at the heart of warfare. He, however, stated that the character of war, which is a subjective component of war, can vary, can change. The classic example I can quote here is the requirement of ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. The generals of yesteryears looked for enemy disposition within a limited tactical battle space because that is what they could influence. But today, information being sought is colossal, both in quantum and quality. Delivery of violence in the medieval times was the blade of the sword or the tip of a spear. But today, because of the technology that is available, a UCAV can deliver munitions at ranges unimaginable and without any physical contact. If you look at the importance of warfare, talking about comprehensive national power of a nation has many variables. Some call it DIME, that is diplomacy, information, military, and economic, we're all aware. Some call it DIME PT, that is the political system and technology is also brought in. And some more call it DIME PLT, wherein the leadership also plays a role. However, one of the constants in all this is the military. And the military is required to create effects across the C5 continuum. And the C5 continuum, that is cooperation, competition, crisis, confrontation, and finally conflict. So in this, warfare enjoys a preeminent position in its statecraft and diplomacy. A famous quote to illustrate this comes from Hitler when he says that where diplomacy ends, war begins. So most of the decisions related to foreign relations and diplomacy are centered around warfare. This is evident from the fact that decisions of individual countries at the international level are more or less either to avoid a war or to prepare for war. The US erstwhile President Harry Truman has once said that the absence of war is not peace. So in today's VUCA environment, we are in a constant state of fluctuation along the C5 continuum, either in crisis or confrontation, or in some cases, conflict as well. Presently, if I look at it, we are on the cusp of a fundamental change in the character of war. Technology, geopolitics, demographics are rapidly changing societies, economies, and the tools of warfare. They're also producing changes in why, how, and where wars will be fought, and who will fight them. The significantly increased speed and global reach of information, and of course misinformation as well, likewise will have unprecedented effect on the forces and how they fight. Earlier wars were fought on land, then we graduated to sea, and finally to air in World War II. But today, three more domains have emerged for kinetic or non-kinetic contestations and conflict, and these are the space, cyber, and the cognitive domain. If you look at the historical perspective, there are commonly held views about what defined each age of warfare besides the domains I mentioned earlier. In the 1920s, air and armor technologies were considered as permanent solutions to the killing fields experienced in the First World War. After 1945, with the advent of nuclear weapons, it created the assumption that conventional wars were too dangerous to be fought because of the escalation risk, and the assumption that the nature of war was a choice between either a nuclear annihilation or a limited conflict. Later, in the post-Cold War international order, the interpretation of the character of conflict was that the end of Cold War has marked the demise of interstate war, and that conflicts would now be initiated by civil strife instead within the country. Peter Singer, a strategist at the New America think tank, among others, captured the popular imagination with his illustration of war fought with cyber, electronic, and robotic systems. While Chris Coker, a British political scientist and philosopher, has argued that with the rapid development of artificial intelligence, this may be the last chance that humans have to determine the nature and character of war. Nevertheless, scholars of strategic culture are aware that relics of the past linger on, and some characteristics are enduring, and in some cases, it comes a full circle too. The character of conflict, that is, how war is fought, always changes as thinking and technology advances and changes. We are aware the arrow gave way to the bullet, the horse to the tank, and the battleship to the aircraft carrier. These inflection points occurred throughout history, and today the power of information is the latest inflection point. We've been talking about data processing, connectivity, artificial intelligence, robotics, bioscience, materials, autonomy, and all the rest. Throughout history, the introduction of new technologies and techniques has been always transformative. Looking at new forms of warfare, today warfare is becoming more lethal and precise. Crises are unfolding rapidly, compressing decision cycles and heightening the risk of miscalculation and escalation. Conflict is placing a premium on speed of recognition, decision, assembly, and action. Ambiguous actors, intense information wars, and cutting edge technologies are further confusing the situational understanding and blurring of the distinction between war and peace, between combatant and non combatant, between friend and foe, and perhaps even between humans and machines. All the domains are being viciously contested, forces operating under increased public scrutiny, persistent enemy surveillance, and masked precision long range fires with area effects. Close combat on sensor rich battlefields of the future will be faster, more violent, and intensely lethal, and operations will likely occur in complex, densely populated urban terrain. However, multi domain warfare requires the right capability to achieve one's aims. Looking at the term hybrid warfare, this first appeared as early as 2005 and was subsequently used to describe the strategy used by Hezbollah in the 2006 Lebanon war. Hybrid and asymmetric warfare are an everyday war that developing countries are facing in the military and economic competitive environment. It is difficult to categorize hybrid warfare as a military or quasi military challenge, but has elements of military and non military domains. There's been a lot of clamor of articulating a new lexicon for warfare, be it the gray zone, fourth generation warfare, or hybrid warfare. But if you want to put it in perspective, we can go back and take the example of Ramayana, where Hanuman was the first proponent of gray zone warfare. His foray into Lanka was aimed at targeting the cognitive domain at multiple levels. By burning Lanka, it was an asymmetric warfare at its best. And even the visit of Angad to the court of Ravan was a military intimidation at some level. So what goes around comes around, or old wine can be bottled in new bottles. Why only Ramayana? Deception manifested itself in Mahabharata. That misinformation about Ashwathama, the son of Guru Drona, led to Drona's death, with Yudhishthira muttering, Ashwathama hato hata na nara na kunjarova, wherein he said Ashwathama is dead loudly, and whether elephant or human was, just muttered, but was enough, in the cognitive warfare to push Drona into an abscess of despair, wherein he was killed. Today, the conundrum that most strategic and operational commanders and political leaders are grappling with even today during the current standoff with the PL in Eastern Ladakh is, are we at war? No more are there announcements on radio or television by head of states, a declaration of war as it happened in 1971. Today, war has an element of deniability. We are at war, but we don't wish to own it or even acknowledge it. Ambiguity is a key characteristic of modern day warfare. We need to be confusing so that the enemy is not able to gauge our intentions. The world woke up to passenger planes being used with devastating effect on the Twin Towers, leaving everyone totally dumbfounded. So, looking at the 21st century, the opening salvos of the 21st century war may not be a conventional attack, but a range of other hostile actions designed to weaken a state. It may take the form of a cyber attack or attacks from unidentified sources, engineered economic crisis, or even a pandemic, as it is panning out to be in the present day context. Thus, the argument goes that a nation may be at war without knowing it, and sometimes also without precisely knowing who exactly the enemy is. In the past, the combat's immediate goal was military, always military, to damage the other side's ability to fight. Now, however, an attack's immediate purpose is often to produce news reports that will put pressure on the enemy's decision makers without actually reducing the ability to fight. The target is the enemy's will rather than his capability. Today, entire societies are at risk from the increasing weaponization of erstwhile civilian domains. That is, trade, interpersonal communication is being weaponized, the cognition domain and economic interdependence that also is being weaponized, as we're seeing it happening right now. The risks also emanate from pervasive nature of data dominant technologies and the absence of well defined battlefields. So, indeed, the nature of war has not changed so much as it has become diffused. Violence has moved from physical domain to become a more structural, targeting the cognitive vulnerabilities of a state, including political decision making processes, while exploiting fault lines within the country and fomenting mistrust between the government and the citizenry. To target the cognitive domain of the adversary, troops are not the only target, as the target list has become more comprehensive and exhaustive so as to have the vectors to achieve the desired results on the target. To name some of the key vectors, one is cyber attacks. We've all talked about it. Countries like Russia, China, and Israel are resorting to cyber attacks, which can cripple the critical infrastructure of the adversary. Quote an example: downloading of the virus by Israel into the Iranian nuclear program, set by decades, and Israel didn't even acknowledge it. The use of drones for surveillance as well as attacks have increased both by states and non-state actors. The attack on Aramco by the Houthi rebels is a classic example. And now, recently, the Chinese spy balloon over the United States of America has added another dimension to the surveillance and intergathering. Social media and the innovative use of cyberspace have helped even individuals to take on states through suicide attacks and lone wolf attacks, with the potential to cause social tensions and disharmony. The agitation at the US Capitol Hill was galvanized over social media and created a law and order situation questioning the basic structural ethos of the United States of America. Coming closer home, rumors over the social media, in 2012, created mass hysteria, and citizens of the Northeast in Bangalore, it created a mass exodus. It created a lot of panic that time in 2012. Data mining and artificial intelligence can be used to influence public opinion. Example: the Internet Research Agency, a Russian cyber group, has been alleged to have influenced US elections and Trump's march to the White House. Socio-psychological tactical attacks. Countries manipulate the refugee population in the countries to incite protest and conduct espionage through friends and relatives in the home country. Terrorism. The emergence of powerful terrorist organizations and the use by nations to destabilize adversaries. We have a very clear example: Pakistan funding terror activities in India. The spectrum of conflict now ranges from conflict between states to conflict with non-state actors and proxies. Even non-state actors are increasing their capabilities in traditional warfare which can be seen from the takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban. Biological and chemical war. Looking at the extremely competitive scenario, countries have opted for biological and chemical weapons. Russia has often used nerve agents to kill its adversaries. Syrian regime has used chlorine gas and sarin and mustard gas against the rebels. Nuclear war. Development of tactical nuclear weapons by countries such as Pakistan creates uncertainty in the entire South Asian region. Economic war. There are new avenues of economic war, such as the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese, where economic aid is provided to further military and strategic objectives. We are all aware it's happening all around. And another variant, of course, is the debt trap diplomacy employed by the Chinese in Sri Lanka and Pakistan and even in Africa. Coming on to diplomatic war, these days, very aggressive foreign policy stance taken by countries like China's wolf warrior diplomacy. In this type of conduct, the diplomat fiercely attacks the adversary, at times adopting a very aggressive stance and a confrontational stance targeting the cognitive domain of the adversary. This is diplomacy as a vector of war, which sounds quite an oxymoron, but over a period of time, we have another oxymoron that has started to take shape, that is military diplomacy. Military diplomacy. So, in addition to sustaining India's influence abroad, the soft use of hard power, that is, the Indian armed forces, have to face an increasingly global footprint of the Chinese military. And in order to counter this, the Indian armed forces should have a coordinated long-term approach to engaging these countries and help build and maintain current and future partners, some of which are targets for the Chinese military influence. Countries even in Latin America and Africa may soon become essential to India, and unless India provides a degree of presence, military partnership, and long-term dedication to economic development, all these countries have a default option for assistance as China as a convenient partner. We need to be careful on this. So we should work towards building capabilities and partnerships to maintain worldwide peace and stability. Although the lines between what are doctrinally military or diplomatic missions may blur, it is to the advantage of both the MA and the military to capitalize on any opportunity to advance the policy and security of India. The fact that China is increasingly involved in South Asia, given Beijing's influence, there is further reason for India to take a more active approach and mitigate these vulnerabilities. So, besides the strategic level and military intervention in the diplomatic domain, the unilateral actions by China to alter the LAC in Eastern Ladakh brought to fore another dimension of military diplomacy, that is the flag meeting which were happening at the co-commander level, which was a key factor in resolving operational and tactical standoffs. This aspect of military diplomacy exposed the military commanders to an aspect of soldiering which is quite alien to them. The standoffs have been resolved with military diplomacy, executed from a position of advantage, precipitated by initial kinetic military action. And merger of kinetic and non-kinetic lines of effort to resolve a military problem demands development of competencies within military leaders at operational and tactical level to achieve the desired results. So military diplomacy at this level opens a channel of communication between the armed forces of the two states and develops a hand-on working relationship to resolve tactical problems at a tactical level, and will also assist in gathering and analyzing information of the armed forces and the prevailing security situations. Just sum up the reasons for the changing of the character of war. The reasons for changing of character of war, of course, the first one is technological progress. The rapid progress of technology with the emergence of AI, robotics, big data, and the incorporation of the military hardware has increased the uneasiness of the countries. Political changes, emergence of powerful and populistic leaders and cutthroat politics, where no leader can appear to be weak, which has resulted in interference in the domestic politics of other countries to destabilize the government. We've seen this recently happening with the release of the videos by the BBC. So interference in the domestic politics of other countries to destabilize the government is also one of the reasons which is changing the character of warfare. Rise in proxies. There's been a rise in proxies with complicated interest and relations to the patrons. And proxies, while not acknowledged, but the secret usually is an open one. Information flow. By enormously increasing information flow around the world, the internet, small satellites, drones, improved sensors, cell phone video cameras, and broadband connectivity are transforming both war and politics. These technologies allow military forces to find targets and strike them with a great precision and from long distances. We saw that happening in the Ukraine-Russia war, wherein the mobile communication of the Russian, one of the locations was the location of the troops was given out, which the Ukrainians were able to target very easily. So, what are the impacts of the changing character of the warfare? The first and foremost impact is that there's been a rise in the defense budgets of countries. This diverts the resources which could have been invested to provide food, water, shelter to the people along with social security. The process of globalization has been roadblocked because of the changing character of warfare with the rise of protectionism and nationalism, which has been exacerbated further by the COVID pandemic, which we've been seeing the last 2 years. The democratic rights of people, are being crippled in a way in the name of national security because of increased surveillance that each nation has to carry out, which of course is unavoidable. Terrorist groups are adopting war strategies that blur lines between the domestic and the international, between the civilian and the military, between diplomacy and armed conflict, and also between crime and war. With this background, what should be India's strategy? It is important that India should charter its own path in the unstable geopolitical environment and should continue to focus on building internal capacity, with the stress being on ensuring robust and sustainable long term economic growth. Ensure social harmony and brotherhood within the borders so that the enemy is not able to take advantage and create a discord. Developing infrastructure along the borders, and of course, modernizing the armed forces and ensuring coordination between the defense forces and the intelligence agencies. With regard to modernization of the armed forces, this will include doctrinal, organizational, and most importantly, the cognitive changes within the military leadership. That's very, very important. It is also very critical that we fill the ranks with military personnel who not only have a grasp of emerging and niche technologies, but also possess the creative bandwidth to make use of them for innovative solutions to counter the adversaries. That besides, structural changes are required within the Indian Armed Forces to make them better prepared for the ongoing and future conflicts, for future periods of conflict. And this is particularly important given that the nature of emerging technologies puts flat, decentralized, and modular organizations in the best position to take advantage of these technological innovations. The successful conduct of future warfare will hinge on rapid communication, near instant decision making, concerted application of firepower without necessitating the physical aggregation of military forces, the use of kinetic tools, and precision targeting. All these attributes require a relatively flat organization where the generation of options and decision making is done amid the presumed denial of communication in an accelerated time frame apart from being theater specific and autonomous. In the current form, the Indian Armed Forces are armed, trained, and equipped for conventional operations and have limited options to respond to gray zone operations. While the Indian Army has had considerable success in counterinsurgency and counterterrorism operations in the union territories of J&K and the Northeast, the warfighting part is still conducted using conventional weaponry. Domains such as space, information, the electromagnetic spectrum are deemed peripheral to conventional operations. This creates a dilemma. In certain instances, the conventional combat potential of the armed forces fails to provide adequate deterrence against the use of gray zone operations by the adversary, imposing a decision dilemma. How should they respond to a non-kinetic operation using kinetic tools? The Indian Armed Forces, therefore, require tailor-made operations to respond to emergent scenarios which also include non-kinetic operations. The wide spectrum of threats detailed so far require military personnel, especially in the hierarchy, to realize that technology-enabled solutions will need to be given primacy in the future battle space. So I'm not arguing that conventional platforms be discarded in favor of purely digital solutions. Rather, the technology and its attributes need to be at the center of planning for future operations. So while talking about the role of emerging technologies, it is important to recognize that traditional war fighting has not ended. Though it is important in conflict, its importance in conflict domination has reduced. So information operations will dominate every stage of the conduct of kinetic operations. The initiation, the conduct, and the termination. Info operations will always have a role. And since they have the potential to create instability in the target country. To give an example, the US assassination of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani in 2020 and Iran's retaliation by targeting an American base in Iraq using missiles are examples of kinetic operations manifesting an information effect. So both these countries' leadership could convey the resolve to the respective domestic audience without going to war with each other. Indian commanders need to look at technological solutions to take the fight to the enemy. And this can be done by focusing on its will to fight, not just on military victories on the battlefield, but also on the cognitive and information domains. So, to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, while we still yearn for conventional maneuver warfare with its
Yeah, I think it appears that he seems to have got disconnected. Just please hold on. Let me just get in touch with him. Okay, so sir is just getting back. I think he's had a problem with his internet, and we will continue as soon as he's back. Meanwhile, uh, as he's about winding up his observations, my request to the audience is to frame your questions, keep it as brief as possible. Request all of you to just briefly introduce yourself so the speaker knows who he's addressing. And if you would like to ask a question, you can either do that on the chat box or you can just raise your hand. Just please bear with us. I also welcome General Narsimhan sir. I think he's joined us. I hope you're able to hear us, sir, and good afternoon.
I'm here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining. General Joshi has just lost his connectivity, sir.
No problem.
He's joining back, sir.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Roger. Sorry. So
Yes,
my
sir. Yes.
apologies. We just lost the internet,
Sir.
but thankfully it was just at the conclusion stage. And so I'll just go over the conclusion once again. To conclude, while we still yearn for the conventional maneuver warfare with all its, power, clarity, and glory, the strategic articulation and distinction between combatant and non-combatant. But today, a hacker sitting in the comfort of his home can cause irreparable damage to the country's economy. He is as much a combatant as the soldier who's wielding a weapon in the battlefield. I would also like to quote the U.S. Secretary of Defense, erstwhile U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, when he told West Point cadets that, to quote him, when it comes to predicting the nature and location of our next military engagement since Vietnam, our record has been perfect. We have never once got it right. So that is the challenge. And as we grasp these implications, it is imperative that we critically re-examine our operational models. The advent of new technologies and the rising importance of virtual domains like space, cyber, are evolving the relationships among soldiers, machines, and software. And as the character of war is undergoing a fundamental change, we need to develop and sustain new forms of maneuver, mass, and mutual support. What we must remember is that the speed of implementing these changes will be the key to determining the factor, will the key determining factor in the next war. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that was so concise exposition of the various factors that actually is influencing the how the character of warfare is evolving, and the roles and responsibilities of the soldier is also gradually changing, along with how these influential factors are impacting us. And also thank you very much. Right at the end you spoke about how India could respond. I think this is very, very valuable insights. We have a number of we've been very privileged that a number of our distinguished experts have also joined us, and General Dushyant Singh is here, sir. I'll come to you. I'll request you to go first, sir, and I know General Khandare will also add in something. So General Dushyant Singh, please, sir.
Uh, First of all, Jan Joshi, my compliments for a wonderful lecture on gray zone and emerging warfare scenarios. A question which has been bugging me for quite some time, because this is also my area of research nowadays, is that gray zone is a multi-domain aspect which encompasses the entire dime paradigm. So therefore, what structural change you refer to this particular issue, that there is a need for structural changes in the armed forces to deal with it. What, in your opinion, are the structural changes which you would recommend at the armed forces level and also at the army level, if you can elaborate on that? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, I made a broad reference to that with the technology that is coming in and with the need to have quick responses, short decision making, crises happening at a short notice. So there's a need, while, a proper structure that has to be made, we'll have to work on that, but a need for a flat organization wherein the decision making are quicker, faster, and there will be a need to have organizations wherein we give off there is a lot of decentralized a command where people are able to react without referring to the channel of the command. So I will not be able to give you offhand proper organization as such, but like I said, broadly it will have to be a very, very flat organization with decentralized command.
Thank you, sir. I think we should take advantage of the fact that General Khandare is among us. So I'll go first to General Khandare. I know a number of you have put in some questions in the chat box. Pradyumna from Singapore is also here with us, so he wants to ask a question. I'll come to you, General Khandare, please, sir.
Thank you, Venkat, and a very big thank you to Joe.
Thank you, sir.
You covered the topic so beautifully. I don't have a question. I just wanted to add on to the content that you've given. Firstly, gray zone warfare is not restricted to a country, it covers the entire region. So, when you talk of capability enhancement or convergence of ideas or thoughts, the goals, I think the entire region needs to be looked at, and that's where diplomacy becomes extremely important. Because gray zone warfare spills over what are perceived to be national boundaries, but for the actors, there's nothing like a boundary there. So that is one point I wanted to bring in. And the second point is it's not purely a military affair, it involves the citizens. So, as a nation, there has to be a special endeavor to bring in strategic culture, thinking, and national resilience, because gray zone warfare is not going to stop at a particular line that we think of. And the third thing is maybe learned people are here. General Narsimhan is here. General Dushyant is here. General Joshi is here. If we are into gray zone warfare and it's not going to stop, is the selection criteria for our human resource correct? Or do we need to change it? Because our criteria for human resource, especially officers and other ranks, is built purely on conventional warfare. Do we need to bring in certain changes in the cognitive domain, which General Joshi mentioned? And he mentioned about cyberspace, cognitive. And to a large extent, these are non-attributable, which means there is nothing white and black. There is a lot of gray. So do we need to have a look at it? This is something which we will have to think about. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
General Joshi, do you want to react to that, or should we
No,
move?
I think General Khandari just elaborated. So while the last point that he mentioned, I totally agree that we need to look at, while the Agniveers is the new policy that we're looking at recruitment, and technologically enabled, soldiers, which I made a mention also during the speech, during the talk when I talked about it, is the need of the hour. Without that, we can't be looking at just conventional operations. So soldier has to be technologically totally enabled and intelligent in that manner.
General Narasimhan, sir, would you like to add in something now, sir?
I'll come in a little later.
Sure, sir.
You
Sure,
go
sir.
ahead with the questions because others are all waiting for the questions to come.
Yeah, sure. I think I'll go to one or two questions in the chat box before I come to Pradyumna. So I think, so General Dushyant Singh, I think, was asking the question on this. So Naresh, basically, who's from the Indian Council of World Affairs, sir, Delhi, he says Chinese influence operations across the world is constantly evolving as a threat. It is being used as a tool for political interference as well. How can India be better prepared to handle this? I think he's talking about Chinese influence operations and threats, right, sir? That is question number one. Do you want to take one more question, sir, before you answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Yash is a student, sir, from the MA Security, Defense, Law and Laws. That is, and he's currently working with Seawater in Delhi. He says, understanding the context and nature of the modern day warfare, have Geneva Conventions lost their significance? Do you think there is a need to restructure it, and laws regulating the conduct of war, keeping in mind the hybrid nature of warfare which you mentioned? That's the second question, sir. I think Kritika wants to ask a question, so I'll come to you, Kritika, a little later after Pradyumna. Sir, I'll take one, or maybe you can answer these two and then I'll come to another two, sir.
Okay, so the first question talked about, the Chinese influence that is evolving all over the world, and the political interference that is happening. So we have been seeing this happening over a period of time, right from the days, maybe from 2005, we've been talking about the pearls, which they've been spreading all over and trying to increase the influence. And this is well known to everybody. And the need to counter this, it lies with the MEA, which has been very, very proactive. Of course, we've been seeing of late how our foreign policy has changed, being more assertive. and how we are trying to counter the influence of the Chinese influence in our neighborhood as well as in Africa. The second point, the second question we just talked about is modern day warfare, Geneva Convention structuring. That definitely is a need, but it's not going to be easy because the hybrid warfare, the gray zone warfare, while I talked about that in my talk, we don't even know who the enemy is in some cases. So how do we get into the Geneva Conventions? So while the point that you talk about is very, very valid, there is a need, but this will need a lot of deliberation that how exactly do we go about, doing this and and work out the new Geneva Conventions, which, like you said, are actually required, but it's not going to be easy. Thank you.
I think we'll take two questions from those who raised their hands and then return to the chat box. Pradyumna, please.
Thank you, Dr. Venkat. Good afternoon, General Joshi. My name is Pradyumna. I'm a student of Strategic Studies, master's student. So my question is pertaining to the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia, like I think you highlighted very well the dangers from cyber attacks. And Russia is known for its cyber capability, at least it was before the war. And really, when the war started a year ago today, everybody expected a vicious cyber attack through which Russia will be able to annihilate Ukraine, a combination of cyber and kinetic both. But that has not happened. Why do you think that is so, and what lessons can India learn from it?
Well, this is a big subject in itself. There's a lot of norms which were or the new character of war that was being propagated, that the new wars are going to be short and swift, have been put aside, that we are not going to get into a full scale war again. That new character of war which has been talked about of late has again been put aside. And while Russia has called it not a full-fledged war, they're calling it some special operations, which of late now with the President Biden now visiting there, President Putin has now made a statement that that we might now be escalating into full-fledged war. So while we've been talking, while we've all been surprised, that initially, while Russia being such a big power, they should have been able to just go through Ukraine and capture Kiev like a hot knife through butter, but that did not happen because firstly maybe they did not. He called it special operation. They did not use the full force, but that you want to use. And secondly, the Ukrainians also have been using technology much to their advantage. And of course, the support of the NATO and the US to Ukraine has also been a big factor where the stalemate is there. And let's see how this pans out now subsequently. There are a lot of lessons to be learned. Of course, it's continuing.
Thank you, sir. I welcome General Mistry, who's joined us. I think got slightly delayed, sir, but we'll come to you. I hope you land in your points a little later. Kritika, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. We're students of SISILS, School of International Cooperation, Security and Strategic Languages. In your lecture, you mentioned that India should have a long-term dedicated approach to increase their presence in Latin American and African nations. Could you, indicate some suggestions or recommendations as to how should we go about it, considering China and Russia both have extensive presence in these two continents?
Okay. While I did mention about it, that was basically to counter, the Chinese influence. But if you want to look at a plan per se, then it's a separate subject in itself, which will require a kind of a separate topic or separate lecture in itself. But what I was talking about is basically, looking at the changing character of warfare, the way China is influencing the nations around us. It is important that India also makes its presence felt to counter the Chinese presence. But exactly how to go about doing that in Latin America is, of course, is a different domain, which we can talk about separately.
Deepak, would you like to ask your question?
Sorry, sir, there is one more question from my class.
Okay. Deepak, just please hold on. I think there is one more question and then I'll come to you.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Anuj. I'm from MA International Relation and Security Studies first year. And my question is, when it comes to information warfare, India is somewhere lagging behind its adversaries like China and Pakistan. They create damage within our society, and we cannot do anything actually. So uh, how can we counter this information warfare challenge in our, in our country?
Yeah, that's a very valid point that you make. We have been lagging behind as far as information warfare is concerned, and we have seen China, Russia, Pakistan. Even Pakistan has been, at the forefront with regard to information warfare. We have made some progress. We have the Defense Cyber Agency now that has come up, and work is being done in this direction. But again, much more work needs to be done, and we need to catch up as far as China is concerned. And this is where the future war is going to be fought. It may not be so much about combat on the ground, winning wars on the ground, but winning wars in the cognitive domain, in the mind space, in the narrative. Winning the narrative war has become more important, actually, to so to say, vis-a-vis, winning the actual battle on the ground. So we have been lagging behind. We need to do much more on this, and of course, lots is happening, and lots more need to be done.
Thank you, sir. I have one more question regarding use of UAVs and drones. Uh, since you are GOC of Northern Army Command, so use of UAVs for patrolling the border areas. So how important is the use of drones for our country, because we are also lagging behind, from our adversary in this field also. So what can be done to enhance our capabilities? Can you highlight this?
Yeah, so there are very valid points, especially on the LAC with Eastern Ladakh. The use of drones, for information was very, very important, and the drones that we had were a game changer, actually. The Heron that we had, and we operated from Ladakh, from Leh, because on the LAC, any movement that you make, even if it's a patrol or a vehicle that goes close to the LAC, it it tends to escalate situations, areas where we are not supposed to be going, or there's a change in the status quo from both sides. The Chinese are doing it, we are raising the red flag, and when we do it, they raise the red flag. So the use of UAVs to gain information is very, very important. And this is a key factor which plays a very, very important role. And the Herons, like I said, we had in Ladakh. We even used the Navy UAVs which came in, and gave us a lot of information. Uh, this is the most important factor, which are required for surveillance. While we are in the process of procurement, much more UAVs, I'm aware that some procurements are on. But like I said, on the LAC, covert surveillance, while the Chinese were able to detect some of our UAVs, but again, these UAVs, Herons, being on own side of the LAC, we were able to see much deep across the LAC and see the movements. And they played a very, very important role during Snow Leopard the last 2 years.
Thank you so much, sir.
Jain, so myself first Pagat from first year ISS. So you mentioned about reforming the operational and leadership capabilities for modernizing the army. So do you think that this approach can be applied to conventional weapons that army possesses? For example, MiG-21 is also referred as the flying coffins by the Air Force personnel. So do you think, sir, weapons like these, which have been proved by scientists from Israel and Russia, that if you use this technology, it can be harmful for the uh, persons, and we have seen a lot of cases where the armed force, air force has lost their pilots like because of this. Do you think that this can be applied to weapons also? This is a lot of modernization.
Yeah, so any army needs the best of the weapons, but finally it boils down to your budget, how deep your pockets are, and the defense equipment is very, very expensive. That you must realize. So while we have been using the so-called, what you call, flying coffins, MiG-21s, but all of them that were flying were operational, and accidents happen. So yeah, we are now looking at Rafales. We are looking at better aircraft, but again, like I said, it all is how deep your pockets are. It all revolves around that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Deepak has been waiting patiently from Bangalore. Go ahead, Deepak.
Sir, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sir, I'm Deepak Srinivasa, Research Scholar, Public Administration and Governance. My question is, looking at where India stands today in the geopolitical world, do you think that like other countries, we just have to focus on national interest being our prime agenda, or should we take a special stand saying that we focus on national interest with global responsibility and set the bar high for the world to look at us in the days to come or years to come?
Yeah,
What
good
should be our
question.
attitude?
So while national interests come first, there's no doubt about that. But if you want to be a global power, then you have to look at global responsibility.
So
Which
looking
India
at
has
where we
been
stand
doing.
today,
Yeah.
yeah, where we stand today at vantage point. So taking on the world, so should we take the stand first and say that we take the national interest along with global responsibility and set the bar high to set an example to the world? As is India in the position today to take up such a stand?
So we have taken a stance. We saw Turkey, our response,
Mhm.
and so many such cases wherein we saw COVID during the COVID times, how we responded with the pharma, with the vaccines diplomacy that we did. It was appreciated all over the world. And so India is, while you talk about Russia, we talk about our oil coming from Russia, national interest. But as far as the global responsibility is concerned, we are focusing on that as well in a very big way as a responsible nation, and that is important. We need to look at that.
I think this
Thank
concept
you.
of enlightened national interest that even the foreign minister has mentioned in his recent book, I think is one, example that you can sort of think about to answer this question also, Deepak.
Yes, sir.
Um,
It's a correct enlightened national interest.
yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat box, sir. One is from Utkarsh Tripathi. He says, sir, with the economic collapse of our neighbors and some of the traditional enemy projects a danger to us. Basically, what he's saying is the economic collapse of our neighbors and the traditional enemy, probably referring to Pakistan, is it projecting a danger to us? And in addition to it, some Pakistani political personality floated an idea to sell or trade its nuclear weapons to other nations. What could be the implications of such rogue elements in addition to obvious social implications?
Yeah, good question. The economic collapse of Pakistan is worrisome, and for too long, we've been talking about that a stable Pakistan is in our interest. But I think the thought process is now changing. That every time there was a crisis in Pakistan, India would relent, and we would sort of come to their assistance in some way or the other. But now, actually, as you see, the way things are happening, Pakistan is totally collapsing economically. But we have to be very, very clear. We have to take a stance, that terrorism and friendship cannot go hand in hand. You can't be sending terrorists across the line of control and creating problems for us in JNK, and at the same time looking for assistance from us. That definitely cannot happen. The other aspect that you mentioned is about selling nuclear weapons. I don't think that can happen in today's world. There is no way. That will be a disaster actually. So while people talk about it casually, but that is one thing that can never happen. That they will trade their nukes, to come back strong economically. That will never happen in my view.
Thank you, sir. Rahul Rawat, who's joined us here today, says, given the changing character of warfare, operational concepts, doctrines, and warfighting techniques, what kind of initiatives are being taken by the army to adapt to such changes?
Okay, so this again is a subject in itself, a big subject. So studies are being carried out. I've been out for about a year, but lots is happening. Use of drones, use of information warfare. We are focusing on, and in all aspects, as far as technology is concerned, there's a big focus, renewed focus in the army. While the organizational changes have not happened as yet, but the influx of technology to counter or to cater for this changing character of warfare is definitely happening. I don't want to go into specifics, but I want to assure you that lots is happening. But of course, the organizational changes is going to take time, which I talked about. That we need a flat organization wherein there is quick decision making, and quick reactions to evolving situation, which is going to happen in the new character of warfare.
I think before we conclude, I just wanted to ask if Chandrasekhar sir, who's been here right from the beginning, would you like to add anything, sir? Chandrasekhar, who's the MOD, Ministry of Defense, for many years. If you can hear me, sir.
Absolutely a great fan of General Joshi for many years. He knows that. But all
Thank
my
you, sir.
questions got answered today. So I really have nothing to ask. But it's a great honor and pleasure to listen to him after such a long while. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. It's a pleasure to speak to you. I didn't know you were online, sir.
Very much so. I had to attend your lectures.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Dr. Krishnamurthy is there from Bangalore, sir, from our IPS office. He's also been listening in. Sir, would you want to take, would you like to share your observations, sir, if you are able to hear me? Dr. Krishnamurthy, sir. Okay, okay. I think General Mistry and General Narasimhan are here. I don't know, sir, whether you'd like to add anything. Please go ahead, sir, General Narasimhan.
Is General Mistry
So
coming
you
in?
can go in first, sir, and then maybe General Mistry.
All right.
So I'll defer to you.
Hi. It's a very interesting topic, and partially I missed General Joshi's remarks because of some technical glitch. I'm trying to still set up my home in Coimbatore, so pardon me in case if I have missed something. But a couple of things which came up in the question and answer, I thought I'll come in and answer. One is this recruitment about recruiting technically qualified personnel. Please understand in addition to what General Joshi mentioned, everybody would like to have a technically qualified person. But the heavy lifting on the battlefield has to still be done by the fighting arms, infantry, artillery, armored, and the like. So the problem is, while technology is advancing and we need soldiers, we are actually technically qualified, but we should not lose the sight of that technology is only a facilitator and a force multiplier. By itself, it can't win a war. Actually, Russia-Ukraine campaign is one of the examples of this. Amount of technology that has been used by Ukraine and others, if that was the case, then the war should have been over a long time ago. It has not happened. So ultimately, we need to ensure that we are able to fight the combat in our own traditional way. Also, should not be forgotten. That should be kept in mind. That is point number one. Second is on the Geneva Convention. Geneva Convention was actually made for a conventional warfare. It was done at a time when both the sides were in. It was done to ensure both the sides which are fighting, treat each other respectfully, the prisoners of war and others. If you start extrapolating that to the grey zone warfare, it will never work because it was not meant for grey zone warfare. For grey zone warfare, firstly, people have still not been clear, and there is no constantly accepted kind of definition on grey zone warfare as yet. Anything and everything which can't be put into the conventional warfare gets dovetailed into the grey zone warfare. So it is still evolving, but let us not mix up the Geneva Convention with the grey zone campaign because it was not meant for it, actually speaking. The third is on the drones. Drones is something which General Joshi is very well aware of. He has used plenty of it during his tenure as GOCNC Northern Command. But more and more what is evolving is actually the armed drones that we need to be combating with or looking at. And the counter to drones is something that we need to be working on. I'm sure a lot of work is going on, but the way to counter drones is not put drones in front of them. You have to probably work differently because if a swarm of 200 drones come opposite to you, obviously you cannot fly 200 drones to interact with them. It's not possible. So you need to probably look at technical solutions to counter the drones. The fourth thing is about national interest versus global responsibility. See, you have to strike a balance between national interest and the global responsibility. Actually, General Joshi answered that very well. Where our national interests are involved, national interest has to be kept in mind, and that should be the primary concern. That is not to say that you need to overlook global responsibility. We need to take that also. That global responsibility will actually get dovetailed and also will get curtailed by your capabilities and capacities. So you need to understand how to strike this balance between national interest and global responsibility. And the last point is on the PAK and the leakage of nuclear weapons. I fully agree with General Joshi. Nuclear weapons are not toys that just can be just taken up and given it to somebody. It's not going to take place that way. A lot of people are watching it, and there's a close observation on this. So obviously, it is not going to take place. These are the points I had. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much, sir, for adding into your the insightful remarks. Actually, General Mystery, of course, is very much in house, but we'll always like to listen to you, sir. So please go ahead. I know you've not been able to join us in time, but please, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Venkat. Same like Jal Narasimhan, my apologies. I was able to join only for about last 10-15 minutes of the question answer session. So I would restrict my remarks to those issues. And just a couple of points, I think most have been very well answered by General Joshi and elaborated further by General Narasimhan. I would just reiterate that, as far as this issue of national interest versus global responsibility, see, we have to try and find a convergence between global responsibility and national interest. However, if it comes one is at the cost of the other, then obviously the national interest would prevail. No nation would put its own national interest at risk, and with the opportunity of being some kind of an utopian solution for world problems. So the priority always remains national interest, but idea is to find national interest being achieved through performing your global responsibility. That's the whole idea, and that is where the concept of enlightened national interest as brought out comes up. On the regional instability, I think we must be very clear that any form of instability in your neighborhood is not good for anyone. That instability invariably has a tendency to spill over. You will have lots of problems, trans-border movement of people, pressures would be there, economic compulsion would be there, survival is there. So no instability in your neighborhood should be welcome. No, we need to find solutions to that. And just to reiterate, this spark nuclear selling is some kind of maybe a back-ended attempt to draw kind of attention to Pakistan and create some kind of fear psychosis so that the powers would decide to help out Pakistan one more time. It should not be taken anything more than such kind of silly gimmicks. There was a question about how do we increase our influence in Latin America and Africa. I think if you go back to our involvement in Africa, we have been very actively involved in Africa right since the colonial times. We have had a lot of presence in most of the British colonies in Africa, and through that, we have already created a lot of goodwill for our people. Most African countries have had Indian teachers, and post the World War II, since the time of the UN and the UN peacekeeping missions, India has been practically involved in most peacekeeping missions in the entire continent of Africa. So we already have a lot of goodwill and presence in Africa. We have reached out to most African countries with development assistance. So lot is already being done. And I think a similar model can be adopted for increasing our presence in Latin America. And some of the small beginnings could be done through the ITEC program, which is funded by the MEA. And that you can make small beginnings and thereafter have the teachers exchange programs and so on, which has more of human capital value, and then gradually increase your footprint. On the changing character of warfare, I have not listened to that part, but I would just like to reiterate one issue which I think General Narasimhan also touched upon, and that is that the people had almost written off conventional conflict as if it is unlikely to happen in the 21st century. I think that has been disproved. that the conventional state versus state conflict is very much on the cards. And you need to be capable of executing that. And in that, besides all the other elements of modernization, technology, training, a major factor that has been brought out in the Ukraine experience is the national will. This is, an intangible factor which has not often been given adequate attention. But when you talk of cognitive domain, the will to win or the national will to resist is very much part of the cognitive domain of warfare. And if you cannot convince a people to lay down, they will continue to resist irrespective of the amount of punishment that they can absorb. I mean, that is the kind of willpower that this nation has displayed, and that is one major important lesson. And in that sense, even Russians have not given up. They have also suffered huge amount of casualties, but they're not giving up. Everybody said that if this war prolongs, it is the end of Putin, and once the body bags start going home to Russia, it will be another Afghanistan, and kind of Putin will not be able to sustain for long. But on both sides, this part has been disproved. Both countries have displayed amazing ability to persist with the conflict. So your ability to fight prolonged conflict, to have adequate stamina, to have adequate wherewithal, logistic capability, ammunition stocks, repair echelons, you name it, replacement of manpower, fast training, etc. Huge amount of capacities need to be created to be able to meet these challenges. That's all I have to contribute. If there are any more issues somebody wants to ask, I think we can discuss if there are. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think these interventions by General Khandare, General Dushyant Singh, General Narasimhan, and General Mistry is only added. In fact, the point on national will was something that General Joshi also touched upon, and the cognitive aspects. I think one of the key takeaways, especially because we are also using this as a platform for our next generation sort of subject matter experts who will hopefully go into serving the country, is that every individual's role today becomes that much more important towards strengthening national security. And so I think that's the point that is being driven on largely through this session. I think Utkarsh has just, he's just made an observation, thanking everyone. I think if there are no more questions or comments or anything, there was one, I think, question that was raised from the students. Would you like to ask one final question? Otherwise, we'll close the session, please.
Yes, sir. So, since, sir, you were GOC in GOC of Northern Command when the Galwan crisis was happening, can you tell the current status? How long will it take to fully resolve, or what is the status of its resolving process?
Yeah. So while most of the issues have been resolved along the LAC, there are 2 points actually which still continue to be, the difference of opinion remains and needs to be resolved. But when that will happen, I cannot give you a definite time frame. The talks are on at the diplomatic level, at the military level also, on and off. We're having the flag meetings, discussion is on. And let's see when the decision happens, and I cannot give you a time frame that when this will happen.
Sir, taking off from this question, since you've been watching at and looking at China up close, and more for the benefit of our students also, sir, there has been this a rather popular or maybe public perspective that the 1962 conflict inflicted a psychological sort of restraint in terms of, for example, our patrolling along the borders, and how that seems to be now changing in the last few years, leading to possibly more confrontations and more such incidents like Doklam and Galwan. What is your perspective on, if I could ask you, in your 40 years of service, how have you seen how the Chinese thinking has evolved, especially particularly on the ground, sir? If you
Yeah.
could share something for the benefit of our students.
So along the LSE, the issue is that we do not have a common LSE. Both sides have their respective understanding of the line of actual control. And so far, what was happening is that over a period of time, uh, both sides used to patrol up to their respective perception of the line of actual control. We used to go up to our perception, the Chinese used to come to their perception, which are, of course, crisscrossing at a large number of places. And wherever these LSEs are crisscrossing, we call them areas of differing perception. So I'm restricting myself right now to Eastern Ladakh only, while these areas of differing perception are there in the middle sector also and in the eastern sector also, Arunachal and that side on the east. So, so whenever we used to patrol, our patrol used to go up to our LSE and their patrol used to come to their perception of the LSE. There were times when both the patrols from both sides came into a same area together. And that is the time which used to happen very, very rarely because till 2014, it was very thinly held. Neither we had large number of forces, nor there was too much of presence on the Chinese side as well, closer to the LSE. So it was on and off when the patrols of both sides used to come, and this used to be called a face-off. So when we started having these face-offs, a drill was evolved since we had these agreements, large number of agreements that how to manage the LSE with the PLA. The 1993 agreement, the 2005, 1993, 1996, 2005, and then the BDCA of 2013, which all revolve around how to maintain peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. Till the time either the LSE is clarified or we have a boundary resolution. So all these agreements, at the cost of repetition, I want to say is that they revolve around that how to maintain peace and tranquility on the LSE, which means that how to maintain the status quo. While both sides have a different perception of the LSE, but we will manage peace and tranquility. So whenever I used to interact with the Chinese in the various flag meetings, right from the brigade commander, the Joshi 3-day there, my point to them always was that we are not here to clarify the LSE. We are here to maintain peace and tranquility. The issue of resolution or the clarification of the LSE and the boundary issue is not with us, it is with somebody else. That is the MEA. They are the lead agency as far as the LSE clarification and the boundary issue is concerned, where we have a special rep. The NSA is a special rep for the boundary resolution. But over a period of time, from 2015 onwards, as we became stronger, more forces got inducted, and we started having more face-offs. And a time came when both sides started engineering face-offs. The drill which was evolved for a face-off is that both patrols by chance came in front of each other. So both sides will take out a flag that you have entered Chinese territory. You say you have entered Indian territory, please go back. After 15, both sides to go back. But now what happens is there are areas, let's say in the Depsang Bulge, where you can see the Chinese post on the other side of the LSE. When their patrol is coming, our patrol used to go and stop them at our perception. Which actually was incorrect, which both sides were doing. So these over a period of time started escalating into situations wherein things got bigger and bigger. And in 2013, we had the Dapsang incident, April 5, when Premier Li Keqiang was to visit India and became a big crisis. And within 15 days got resolved because the Chinese were very keen that the Premier Li Keqiang visit goes through, and we had very clearly indicated to them that if this issue is not resolved, the visit is not going to happen. So 2013 that happened, then 2014, 15 we had the Demchok incident, then we had the Chuman incident, wherein the Chinese started asserting more and more towards their LSE, and our presence also increased, and we started asserting our presence, and therefore the Chinese infrastructure development across the LSE has been very, very fast at a very fast pace, and this is one area where we've been lagging behind. The DHDVO road, 255 kilometers all the way from from Tangse right up to DBO, has been going on for very long, and we have not been able to construct it. It has happened now in the last 2 years that the whole road has been blacktop, bridges have been constructed and all that. So that again is an issue. Now this year in 2020, why this happened, there are multiple reasons that why they did what they did. And I mean, I can keep talking about it, but we could sort of look at it as a separate presentation, Snow Leopard, that what indications China want to get, how India was opposing them everywhere, whether it is CPEC, whether it is RCEP, whether it is, the 370 and UT of JNK, we split that. So many reasons wherein, finally, in my opinion, China wants to assert itself. Listen, I am the boss in this area, and that is where they took these steps to signal to India and to the entire neighborhood, okay, listen, I am the boss. It is a different matter that that we finally had upper hand. We were able to push them back, based on the QBQ actions that we took. And again, this is a very, very huge subject which we can talk about separately.
Thank you so much, sir. Deepak, if you want to ask a very short and sharp question, we'll end with your question, please.
Sir, very short question. How far is India's aspiration for permanency in UNSC according to you, sir?
Sorry, say again. I didn't get you.
UNSC permanent membership. How far is India's aspiration as of today in ground reality?
No. India, it should have been yesterday. India should have been a permanent member, in all respect. And we are actually right now, of course, one of the biggest economies in the world and growing very fast. We are the number one in population. We are now asserting a foreign policy in a big way. We talked about, global aspirations and global responsibilities that we are doing. So India should have been one of the permanent members of UN yesterday, in my view. And it should happen pretty soon, I'm sure.
How far, sir? Maybe in years to come, how many, according to your vision?
Again, say again, you're a little distorted.
In your calculation, how many more years should India wait, sir? Practically speaking.
It's not astrology.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll continue to assert ourselves, and I'm sure slowly, the way our foreign policy is now emerging so strong, and the way we are asserting in a very balanced manner, actually, the way we are taking oil from Russia, and explaining to the world why we are doing it, and the world is accepting that, but that is very credible to our actually external affairs minister.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Deepak. So let me, once again, sir, General Joshi, thank you so much for spending, almost 90 minutes with us. And I hope this session, has inspired a lot of our younger students for whom we usually organize this. And many of these interactions also turn out to be extremely insightful thanks to the support of many of our experts, like, for example, General Khandare, General Narasimhan, General Mistry, Chandrasekhar sir, who've all joined in frequently in many of our talks and shared their, I think, valuable knowledge. General Joshi, on behalf of the university, this is only the beginning, sir, so I should not be thanking you for whatever you have shared with us. I was speaking to General Mistry, sir. I think there would be, a lot more sort of areas where I'm sure that we will work together, sir, in the future also.
Sure.
And as and when time permits, I'm sure, sir, we will have you visit here physically.
Sure.
And I think our students can also take benefit by interacting with you at length without having to worry about time. So again, sir, on behalf of the university and the school, I thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And I also thank the entire audience for joining us, in particular General Khandare, General Narasimhan sir, who's joined us, General Mistry sir, who's joined us, Chandrasekhar sir, Dr. Krishnamurthy from Bangalore. It's been a diverse audience. Pradyumna has been one of our students. He's in Singapore at the Rajaratnam School. So he's joined in. And of course, a lot of our students who've been very enthusiastic asking questions. Thank you once again. And we will be organizing more sessions. The next few sessions are going to be by invite. So I look forward to sending personal invites to some of you, and we'll have a restricted interaction for the next few sessions. But we'll come back once again to discuss at a more public platform. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening. Thank you, General Khandare. Thank you, Shekhar.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Joe. Nice hearing you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Narasimha.
sir.
Thank you, Mystery, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you. Thank you, Pradyumna. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mystery, sir. Thank you. Sir, you're muted, sir. You're muted.
Sir, you're muted, Mr. Sir.
You're muted, sir. General Mystery, sir, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. I was just trying to chat with Pradyumna. He's not only a former student, he's a former colleague.
Multi-domain role. Yeah, General Dushyant, I'm sorry, sir. Thank you so much. General Dushyant.
No problems, Venkat. Nice to hear a lot of deliberations on a subject on which I'm kind of doing the PhD also. Plus, my book is about to be published now.
Wonderful, sir. We look forward to ordering one of those multiple copies for the library also, sir. We'll definitely do that.
Only area where I'm struggling is the structures. So I thought probably people will be able to give me some answers to the structures which will be needed to deal with gray zone conflict. That is one area which we are lacking. And unless you have structures, and this is for everybody, unless you have structures, you cannot respond. Why we say that our responses are weak in information warfare, our responses are weak in gray zone areas, because you've got to have a cross ministerial responsibility. A ministry which has cross ministerial authority to